There we go. We're ready to start here. We are live in the Nutmeg Tavern. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern. We got a special episode today. We're going to have a lot of fun here. Before I can do the thing, I have to put tea in my little teacup. There we go. There, now we can get started. Welcome into the Nutmeg Tavern. We are live, and I'm your host, John Townsend. Today we're going to be talking about this wonderful topic of tea. Tea is... Well, we've got a tea episode coming up, and I had so much wonderful research. Even though the episode went long, I still have more, and I thought, let's do the live stream and let's really dig in to tea in the 18th century. So that's what we're going to do today. So one of this episode is brought to you by this wonderful tea that I've got in the cup right here. This is my go-to tea 24/7. No, I'm not drinking it at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's my go-to tea. I love this tea a lot, and I love it so much that I went ahead and made it a product on the website. So before, we've had the main three kind of teas. We have a bohea tea, which is just like regular black tea, oolong tea, and gunpowder tea, which is a green tea. But this is chocolate mint tea. I really love it. It tastes like, you're drinking hot chocolate, but it's tea. So, for those people who maybe you're not into a whole bunch of, you don't want to do sugar or something, you can use like monk fruit or something like that, and you can have this wonderful tea that is chocolatey and yummy without everything that hangs out with drinking hot chocolate, which, probably not good for you in the long run. But welcome into the tavern, and if you want, she's dropped a link into that tea collection, which, well, you can find this yummy tea. This is a massive topic, and so we're going to get to it in just a second. I could probably go till 8 o'clock, but we're not going to do that because. But I forgot last week about this. Somebody sent us this little thing of ink, handmade oak gall ink. His name is Felix. So thank you, Felix, for sending us in oak gall ink. I haven't had a chance to try it yet. Lauren, did you try it?
No, but I have used oak gall ink before, and I do love it. It kind of starts off like kind of a gray, and then it fades to it doesn't fade. It solidifies into a very rich velvety black.
It's darker.
It's very fun to use.
So there it is. I'll try that out. Thank you so much, Felix, for sending that in. What we have here today is lots and lots of tea and tea equipment and tea paraphernalia. I got a giant stack of it over here, so hopefully I can get to it all. We're gonna look. I got some close-up shots here. I got the 21st century is invaded in the 18th century, and so I have the ability to show you very close pictures of it and some good stuff like that. Tea has got this massive long history in China, obviously, going back, like, depending on how you look at it, almost 2,000 years. Maybe more, who knows? It's like we learn new stuff every day. So the history in China goes back a long, long way. But the history for Europe is a fairly short period. So other than the very random traveler who talks about tea occasionally earlier than the 17th century, there's no real quantity of tea happening that we know of. But the Dutch first bring the tea to Europe in the early 17th century. So we're not sure exactly, 1606, 1607, 1608, sometime in that first decade. The Dutch bring the first box of tea in, and everybody's like, okay, this is crazy. Of course, at the time it was astronomically expensive. And tea doesn't really start to kick it off in Europe, in places like Britain and other places in Europe, until, say, 1660 or so. That's when the East India Company in Great Britain is really starting to pick up on the tea thing, and they're thinking, we can make $1 bazillion by selling this stuff because it doesn't weigh anything, and we can haul it, and people are going to pay us again, $1 bazillion to give them these dried up old tea leaves, and we're going to just make a mint. And that's exactly what they do. They become, in the 18th century, the biggest company in the world. Think Amazon times 3, right? Just huge. That is what happens, and one of the reasons why it's like that is because they're selling tea. Early on, they're selling tea that they traded for by trading to the Chinese sage. So the Chinese thought sage was just the bee's knees, and so they were trading it 4 to 1. They would give 4 times the amount of tea for the amount of sage that they were getting. I don't think that lasted for forever. Doesn't matter. That's how it kind of started, or one of the ways it kind of started. Tea is causing, a lot of trading company conflict, and how is one country going to, sort of take over the tea trade? And so there's a lot of things, political jostling or just plain, get out of my way, kind of jostling that's happening over in China and Japan was where some of the tea was coming from in the time period, to get a monopoly on selling tea into Europe. And interestingly, and I'm not sure, I didn't dig super deep on this, I haven't found all the research, but it's possible that tea shows up in New York before it shows up in places like London, because the Dutch are in New York. Obviously, it's a Dutch colony, and it's possible that some of that tea went there super early on before it was even going to someplace like London. Doesn't really matter because, 50 years later, the English are the people who are trading the tea into the colonies, and New York isn't a Dutch colony anymore. Regardless, it's kind of a fun fact. We're going to look at some pictures. That's going to kind of lead us into particular subjects here because, again, I could talk for forever. It's such a crazy deep topic here for the time period. So let's go into a couple of pictures, and then I'll pop out and we'll look at that. The just the visuals on tea plantations and the places where tea grows are pretty amazing, right?
Beautiful.
Up in the mountains, on hillsides. The tea plants are like a little shrub or a small tree. Something strange going on back there. Anyway, it's a little tree, and they pick the leaves off of it depending on the season, depending on exactly the kind of tea they want to produce. They pick the tea leaves at different times, and obviously you can expect that if you're getting it fairly fresh off the tree, that is going to be a more delicate flavor. But that's what we see here, a tea plantation. This is, I think, maybe even a modern resort. So you can go and stay someplace. You can like stay in a tea plantation, which would be really neat. Again, obviously, going on for a long time in China, it was very developed. By the time the Europeans come and start, wanting to sell it and trade for it and take it back to Europe, there's already such a deep tradition and culture around tea that they don't have to do any special developments. Although it's likely that the people in China or Japan at the time period were probably selling those trading companies the middling or lower quality. It's like, they're foreigners. We don't need to give them the really expensive good stuff. But hey, the Europeans enjoyed it nonetheless. Here is a close-up of a tea plant with this little flower going on here and the tea leaves. Now, something happens. I can't exactly remember what. I'd have to go back and do the deep research about this. But it's tricky. So once the plant flowers, it changes the taste of the leaves. And so you don't actually, I don't think you pick the leaves after it's flowered. It's before that. And you have to be very careful. So you have to pick enough to keep the plant from flowering. But if you pick it too heavily, you might kill the plant. So
I'm sure it's an art.
It's one of those things. It's kind of like the flowering of it has to do with a very specific stage of what's going on when you're harvesting the leaves. And of course, you want to harvest them on a particular kind of day and all this good stuff. But there's a close up of the tea plant. So this is an image from 1803 of a rendition of tea or East Indiaman ships. So we look at those East Indiaman ships, and if you look close and if you're familiar with military vessels of the time period, you'll say, okay, those all have their gun ports open and the guns sticking out. And why is a trading ship all covered with guns? So the East Indiamen in the time period were carrying the wealth of the time period. So those ships might have tea in them, they might have silks in them, and other very, very expensive trade goods. And so they were like armored cars in that you wanted to make sure that all those goods were protected. And some of those waters around there had a lot of piracy. And so the ships were heavily armed, and many times they mimicked the military ships of the time period, specifically to keep those away, even though they might not actually be armed as well as it looks, right? So a lot of it is just looks scary. So some of the cannons might not be real. Some of the cannons might be the least effective kinds of cannons, not carronades and not long guns, but halfway in between, called cannonades, which really weren't good. They tended to blow up and things like that, but they didn't need them very often. So, and of course they weren't as heavily manned as a military ship in the time period. So they couldn't shoot all those guns even if they wanted to. They just needed to look super scary.
Going in for intimidation.
Exactly. And so they were sized like large frigates. They would carry flags and everything that made them look as military as possible without, the military being mad because they were, it's like, you can't pretend to be us, but that's exactly what they were doing. So that's what's going on with the amount of trade that's moving in the time period. It's just that important, especially coming in and out of India and places like China. Here we are, and this is possibly an 18th century painting sort of depicting 17th century early tea use. We have high-end, some musicians and people in fancy clothes, and tea is being served out there at the table. Now, you'll see the tea service is a set. They're little cups without handles, little metal teapot there, and you can even see if you look at the very bottom, on the left-hand side, you see a big pot probably full of hot boiling water for making the tea. So you don't boil water in a teapot. You boil water in a kettle, you pour it in the teapot. And we'll see that depicted in other paintings here in our series. But again, there's two people there just holding the saucers. So yes, people are sometimes drinking the tea out of the saucers in the time period. Excuse me. There's a tea party in 1720, or let's just say the first quarter of the 18th century. Again, fairly high end at this time period. They have a little teapot that's being kept warm there with a little brazier or a tea kettle, and they're keeping it warm so they can pour it into the teapot. And we have a tea service and a very small kind of tea table. So all of this paraphernalia, all the little equipment is important, right? Obviously in China and Japan, tea had a culture around it. They didn't just slam tea into any old cup, right? So everything is important about the tea making and drinking. It's a cultural thing, and that gets imported along with the tea itself into European culture. Not in exactly the same way, but I think probably the sellers of tea said, wait a minute, this isn't just like some old dried leaves. This is a thing, right? We're going to make this a thing. There's going to be, if not the same kind of ceremony, our kind of ceremony. And so we need to sell people not just the old dried leaves, but we need to sell them special cups and special saucers, because it's not the same if you put it in a mug, right? You can't drink tea in a mug. Are you crazy? So we have special tea kettles, tea pots, tea cups, tea tables, tea caddies, little everything. Yeah, you gotta have the whole kit. Yeah, you can't just have, one thing. We gotta have the whole thing.
And you got your little sugar basins,
yes,
and then you got your little
exactly.
sugar tongs, and then you have your little creamer. And
Exactly. So obviously, it's a thing here in the 18th century. So we can see that obviously when we look at paintings like this. Here we go. We have, I'm not sure what's at the extreme right. They look like blocks of jello. Don't know what that is. But we have tea cups, and we have a little tea caddy behind them. We have this large bowl that could possibly be a punch bowl, and the silver tray, which you might serve tea on, and other randomness here. Obviously, the painter is like, ooh, look, I'll put a mirror in there. Look at me. I can do that too. But the teacups are what we're really concentrating here on. And there's something else that's going on with teacups. I'm not sure if we have a particular, I'll just pop out and talk about that for a second. So the tea service is really important. Tea ships, you've loaded up with your ship with tea, and tea is just like, is some old dried leaves. That's a problem because you can't pack it too tightly. So if you've heard of brick tea, it's like a compressed tea. It's in a brick. It's kind of heavy and nice and dense. That is not traded into Europe until the 19th century. All the tea that's coming into Europe is like this. It comes in a wooden box, maybe big. It might be lined with lead or something like that to keep protected. Regardless, it's not that heavy for what it is. So you can fill up a ship with it and you still got weight left. You might have any room left, but you have weight left. And so sometimes in the 18th century, the ballast that they would have in the bottom part of the ship to keep it from being cranked, from tipping over too much, they would need heavy items in the bottom. And so they would ship ceramics, specifically tea accoutrements, down in the ship, in the holds of the ship. So it was kind of a twofer. It's like, well, we usually put rocks down there, but we can put all this ceramic goods down there, and hey, we can make double our money. So the ceramics that were coming out of China and Japan and other places were the best, right? This is high-end, super nice porcelains. And porcelain is a very vitreous and generally white-bodied. Vitreous means it's very close to glass, sturdy and translucent. You could tell when it was clean because it was white. It's all this wonderful stuff. And the Europeans had no idea how to make it. It has to be kind of high fire. You can't just, you can't throw it the same way. It has to, you really have to clean the clay to make it white like that, to make it not melt down. There's all these wonderful things about porcelain that the Europeans didn't know what to do with or how to do it. So they tried to emulate it. They would take a low fire clay and they would maybe find a white clay or sometimes a yellow or a red, and they would put a tin glaze on the outside, which would give you a nice white glaze. But it's a low fire pottery, and it's very easy to chip. It's thick. It's kind of really clunky, right? And they would make these things trying to emulate the designs, the shapes of the vessels, and everything else. You could always tell, though, from a mile away, you can say, that's not Chinese porcelain, that's somebody trying to replicate that. So lower class people would be using pieces like this, which I made that one. And the wonderful stuff coming out of China, of course, looked completely, delicate and perfect and everything like that. We have all these pieces here are from the 18th and 19th century, classic tea bowls from this time period. It isn't until I think the late 17th century that the Europeans discover the secret behind porcelain. And the secret is, of course, all this treating of the clay using a particular kind of kaolin clay and creating a way to something to mix with it so that it turns into this very, very glass-like thing. And then you have to learn how to sort of mold it or shape it into the vessels you need, etc. Even the red kind of glazes is something else. This was discovered, at least the story is, by an apothecary's assistant. I think he's in Germany. He probably young, 20-something, whatever, and he, at the time period, alchemy was a thing. You know, people trying to discover the philosopher's stone. How can I turn base metals like lead into gold? You know, lead and gold are kind of similar. They're heavy and they, you know, it's like, shouldn't there be a way to turn lead into gold? And so this apothecary's assistant decided that he would tell his friends that he could turn lead into gold. And, you know, he probably played a trick on them and said, so, you know, this is what it did, and here's the gold that came out of it, and whatever. The king of that region, and there's lots of little kingdoms in Europe during that time period, he wants the secret. He hears this rumor about somebody who can do it, and he goes and he arrests that person, puts him under house arrest, and says, cough up the secret of turning lead into a gold, or I will never let you loose. Yeah, I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but in theory, is, you know, what they say is true. Anyway, it takes him 5 years, and while he's doing this, he discovers, because he's trying to melt all these metals and do these things, that he while he's building crucibles to melt metals, he discovers the secret to making something like porcelain, or making porcelain. Early on, it was like a red porcelain, and later on, they discover white porcelain or whatever. So he uses this to kind of trade and get his freedom. The king never lets up, though, and he dies an early death, even though he discovers one of the most amazing things. In fact, the king at the time loved porcelain as well as gold, and so it was possibly even, you know, in some ways, a better, more possible thing to discover than turning lead into gold. So really interesting story. And tea is one of the drivers for that technological development because of people loving porcelain and tea so much. You know what? I should probably shut up and let Lauren talk for a second.
I just thought it was funny. You can tell Dad really likes pottery. Like, that's sort of obvious. We will see a little bit of we'll see one of the pieces from the makers of this porcelain from the factory that they founded.
Yes.
I don't really have any questions. Somebody did
Good.
ask about the compressed tea, but it was
Right.
it was before you touched on that.
So, hold on, I'm out. I'm used to drinking tea out of a much larger vessel. This is it's frustrating. So, let's jump back in. This looks like it's a different picture, but it's like exactly the same kind of little teacups there, little saucers. Something's broken in the back. That's the wonderful thing about tea things too, is you break them and then you need new ones, right? I'll bet that bird did it. He looks like that kind of a bird. Anyway, notice the time period, 1660 to 1680. This is a very early time frame for tea. Here is 1730s. This is North American, and we have a teapot, a teacup, no handle, little chunks of sugar there. I suppose that you think she's holding a little spoon of sugar.
That's how I interpreted it. Yes.
Yes, right. So this is America. Yep, tea is popular over here. Is one of these great things that they can export into North America. We know we can drive this consumer demand, and they'll need money to spend on tea, and so they'll have to ship us all their good tobacco and whatever else we have in America. I don't know. Do we have anything else? Anyway.
Hides?
What was that?
Hides.
Yeah, hides. Exactly. This, of course, we got conflict going on. We have Boston Tea Party. People throwing tea overboard. Yes, North Americans want tea, but no, we don't want special taxes on them. The Stamp Act and other taxation is happening. The British are trying to recover some of the money they spent on the French and Indian War, and they start to tax some things, and tea is one of them. Some of those taxes get people so mad that they repeal some of those taxes, but they don't repeal it on tea. And this ends up resulting in the Boston Tea Party. They decide, all these tea ships come in. I think there was 3 of them, and they decided they wouldn't allow the tea to be they wouldn't allow the tea to be taken off the ships and the tax to be paid. Now, what's the thought behind this? Do they do this because they know if the tea is unloaded, somebody's going to buy it and the tax is going to get paid, and they don't want that? And so they decide, I will keep anybody from buying this tea. I think there was even an idea that they wanted to send the tea back, or the people wanted to get the tea back, and they wouldn't allow that either. It's like, no, you can't leave with this stuff and you can't unload it. And so to get them out of the conundrum, people thought, you know what, we'll dress up as Native Americans and we'll go and we'll break open the tea chest and throw it in the ocean, and it'll ruin it. And that was the whole point, to ruin the tea, to make it to cause economic hardship on those merchants, so that they would pressure the government. Well, the government got pressured, but they did exactly the opposite, right? Maybe that was the point. I don't know. But that's what's going on with the Boston Tea Party. If you go to the Boston Tea Party Ships and Museum in Boston, they have a tea chest. That's like the centerpiece of their little museum there. There's a tea chest that you can see. This is a square box. That tea chest has this long history in the family. They tried to break them, or they didn't want people retrieving the tea and using it. They didn't want to say they were stealing it. So there aren't many of these kind of tea chests or any other. This is the only one we know of that survived the Boston Tea Party. So you can check that out. Great fun museum where you can tour ships that were basically reproduction ships of the time periods. And you see they're not huge. The kind of semi-truck of the time period. Great little museum. And they do a fun, there you go. Butcher. Johann, with the inventor of porcelain. That's what's going on with the Boston Tea Party. It causes a lot of political upheaval, and we have later on during the Revolution, sort of it being almost some places sort of locally either against the law or highly frowned upon to drink tea, and so coffee becomes more popular. It's not that people still aren't drinking tea, and there are even Revolutionary War soldiers that talk about getting tea and drinking it. So,
okay, you want to pop out for a little bit?
Sure.
All right. Okay, off-topic question. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard? This person was wondering about storing potatoes, and they heard that it was good to store them in cardboard boxes. Have you ever tried to store potatoes in? I remember we had them up in the attic, and we had them kind of.
You have to dry them.
Yeah, we did dry them first, kind of separate from each other. But then I don't know if there was any specific storage method.
I'm not a potato expert.
There you go.
Sorry. At least not lately.
That was quite some time ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a super chat from Mexico. Any 18th century folks attempt to grow tea in Europe or North America in hothouses or otherwise?
Tea doesn't really get out of China or Japan to any great extent. I think it's first cultivated in Java, or at least tried out. So I think somebody gets kicked out of one of those places. He brings some tea seeds with him, and he starts growing tea in Java. And then the British really discover a type of tea or a way to cultivate it in India in the 19th century. So most tea in Europe before then is really all coming out of Japan and more specifically China. I think Japan was kind of early on. I don't know about that. There's so much information about to learn about that part of it. But there is a place where they grow tea off one of the islands off the East Coast. Someplace, if you find that. It's been a long time since I've done research on that. I don't think they really experimented with that until the 19th century. And I'm not sure if they tried it and then it failed again here recently. Don't know what to tell you about that. I'll go ahead. I'll let you go.
Is it easy for the untrained eye to tell tin glaze versus an expensive glazed vintage ware?
So, I mean, there are vintage tin glazed things. I'm not sure which.
Right. So
you're like apples and oranges.
Right. And but let's say there was a brand new tin glaze, and you were comparing it to a vintage tin glaze.
Easy, easy, because over time, it wears quickly. So a new tin glaze piece like this, which is probably 10 years old, if you use it to any great extent, the glaze will probably crackle. It gets dirty in ways that you just can't clean up. And so it's very obvious to tell an older piece from a newer piece. Now, it might be 50 years old or 150 years old. That might be a little more difficult. I'm sure if you were into super chemistry, you could scrape off a little of it, and judge the actual chemical composition. Undoubtedly, newer ones have a little bit different chemical composition to them, but regardless, and generally the body. So up underneath here, sometimes you can see the actual clay body that it's built upon. And today we have very white clays available to us. In the time period, sometimes the bodies would be redware or some kind of buff. We generally don't do that today because it's so much easier to get this really white clay. And then you put the tin glaze on it. You don't have to put it on as thick to get the same kind of look.
Somebody was wondering if before they had tea imported, whether there were other herbal fruit drinks, infusions that they had.
Yes, they were doing, especially medicinally. They're doing other kinds of like sage tea, right? It's not tea, it's a herbal infusion. And they were certainly doing plenty of that. Generally in a medicinal sense, I don't know that there was a lot of it being used sort of just, hey, it's my morning drink, but they're certainly doing that a lot. And most things start off, not most things, a lot of things start off medicinal. Candy starts off medicinally. Tea starts off medicinally. Coffee, chocolate, all kinds of, and they all are, in a sense, a kind of medicine. I mean, the teas have caffeine in them. They do something, and they also have other herbal components to them and chemicals in them, and we still don't know what they do for us. So.
Okay, have you ever heard of, is it Yaupon holly for tea?
So I've got some Yaupon right here. In fact, let's just boop. Okay, here we go. This is Yaupon. If you could get your nostrils over here and you smell this Yaupon, this is a roasted Yaupon, and it smells exactly like a pile of leaves that you're burning in your yard. That is exactly what it smells like. You would say, what is this, October? You're burning leaves in your front yard? It looks like crushed down leaves. I mean, it's pretty small little crushes, but that is fire roasted Yaupon. This is green Yaupon right there. And it is a kind of a holly that grows in, I think it grows, now you can find it in the South, right? Georgia or some places like that. I think it grew down in the West Indies earlier than that. And used by the Native Americans. It's one of the few North American plants, or possibly the only one, I don't know, that has caffeine in it. This is not herbal.
Wow.
In a sense, it has caffeine in it.
Okay.
So there's and was Yaupon a thing in the 18th century? Yes, it was. people were using, they got this idea from the Native Americans, and they were using this as a tea substitute into the 18th century. In some senses, kind of popular. There's a possibility that it got so popular that the British sort of attacked it. And how did they do that? They changed they gave it a scientific name that was something like Levis vomitus.
Icky, don't.
Right, it's like icky, bad thing, don't want it, probably poison, right? That's some of the story behind Yaupon. There's a lot more for me to research on that. I mean, I researched this just off to the side as a secondary thing. While we're here and we're looking at stuff that's close up. So there's Yaupon. You can see, let me flip back to this real quick. So, that's not what I wanted. You can see how small this is broken down into. I don't know if other versions of Yaupon, they leave the leaves a little bigger, or whether it's hard to do that, but it shatters down pretty finely, almost powdery. That's really, you don't want tea to do that because it's hard to strain out. It kind of turns into, I don't know, like coffee grounds, and who wants that? Yuck. Anyway, so I've got some other teas here, so let's take this away, and let's see what I've got. Let me smell this one. Okay, I think this is that is Hai Song, a green tea from one of the most, like the third most popular tea in the time period. It's a little bit bigger. It's still broken down a bit, but they're the green leaves that are green tea. Obviously, they're not still green. Now, let's try out. This is the classic black tea of the time period. I'll just put some in the tray here. There we go. Black tea of the time period.
Is that the bohea?
Bohea tea, right? So you can see it's definitely got a little bit of a darker color. So bohea, black teas, and oolong teas, they are fermented, or I guess in today's terminology, they would call it oxidized. So they let oxygen get into the leaf itself by bruising it, tearing it, by some mechanical action. And this causes this oxidation and a change in the chemical makeup of what's going on inside of the tea leaves. And this will take time. It's not an instant thing, but it starts to oxidize pretty rapidly. To keep the green tea from oxidizing, and it seems backwards, to keep the green tea from oxidizing, they would roast it in metal pans to stop the oxidation process. And so you would think, this black tea's been roasted, and the green tea, no, they just let it dry. It's kind of the opposite of that. You do have to heat up the bohea at some point, at just the right moment, to keep it from oxidizing further. So you don't want it to just keep going. So there's that. There's also oolong tea. Let me get out the oolong. There's oolong now. This oolong is going to look pretty similar, although this is a longer, you can tell the chunks are kind of bigger. Again, kind of a half fermented tea, I believe. Again, I only had so many years to research this. And I haven't been to China to watch them do it, because I think that would be really, really cool. Maybe we should what if we took a tour? It's like me and, I don't know, however many people want to go along with me, and we'll tour and go to China and look at tea being made. That'd be cool. We
could stay at one of those little resorts in the tea plantation.
That'd be neat. Anyway, so here's oolong tea. Yum yum. The mint chocolate that I usually drink is it's a flavored oolong. Here is gunpowder. So a gunpowder is a green tea, but instead of the leaves being, look at how granulated those are. So if you look up, since we can see them really close here, normally if you just look at them, you can't see that, but those leaves are a little curled up. They curl up the leaves. I think they do it like in a piece of fabric, and they roll it back and forth. Can't remember exactly. Again, it's probably a state secret.
They made sure to take great care of this
right.
tea.
So, probably each and every one is rolled by hand. Anyway, That is gunpowder tea, and it's called gunpowder tea because it looks like the gunpowder of the time period, which was in actually pretty big granules, and it's definitely green tea. But when you make this you pour the hot water on it, these open up, and you get big long leaves, or not big long, okay, like an inch long, even though they're tiny here. Okay. So that is gunpowder tea. And here, I'll show you this one just because I love it so much. And there is the super yummy. It looks like a mix of all of them together. That is the chocolate mint. Oh, I don't know what's in there, but it's magical. Anyway, there's the chocolate mint tea. I just want to eat it right out of that tray. So there are the kind of types of tea. Bohi's going to be the most popular one, like gunpowder and the Haisong and the oolongs. They're kind of all down there fighting for second and third and fourth place. But that's what's going on. If you look at ads in newspaper ads at the time period, you're going to see those 4 or 5 listed. There are a few other names that pop up here and there. Did you want to jump in?
Somebody was asking about green tea, so that part's done.
Right.
No, I think we're...
Yeah, some people might ask, now, of course, there are white teas, there are yellow teas, there's the pure, I don't even know how you say that, kind of teas. You don't see those talked about very often or at all in the time period. I am guessing that they were the higher quality that they just didn't bother to export. It's like, we're not going to waste these on...
well, they won't be as good when they get to the end of their voyage anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Probably more delicate and probably higher priced. And, either the vendors, the traders said, they'll just buy the cheap stuff. And why would we want to... These guys don't deserve it.
Does gunpowder tea taste different to regular green tea?
We would have to do a big tea testing, tea tasting testing. So
tea taste testing?
That's it. We would have to do that. Even the Yaupon, we should have a special episode. We just make all these teas, and it's got hints of burgundy and wood chips. Anyway.
So the Latin name for Yaupon is Elix vomitoria. And vomitoria, I think I'm saying it right. Vomitoria means vomit-inducing in Latin.
See?
So they literally named it yucky vomit-inducing.
Don't you dare drink this.
Which seems a little petty to me, but
I think so.
Well, they were just trying to
petty.
protect their tea empire.
That is so true. So I'm running out of time.
Okay,
people.
go ahead with the pictures.
I'm gonna do pictures. I got all this stuff to look at.
Pour a little tea, and then
I got all this stuff. So you saw the cups, right? Classic tea cups.
Before we do move on, though, I did want to mention we are not going to be there, but the Feast of the Hunter's Moon is this weekend. So just...
Ryan will be there selling coffee.
Oh, excellent.
So if you're going to be down in the Lafayette area or, whatever, definitely go and enjoy. I won't be there, but Ryan will, and you can hassle him and maybe give him a nickel for some coffee or whatever. Before I run out of time, brand new and renewing YouTube members, thank you, Lou Cole, Renee Shepard, Jessica Ristoff, Bro Mayo, a little bit of whimsy, great name, David May, Web Surfer 96, Teddy the Fourth, Judith Cahill, Dustin Decker, and the Bad Idea Lab. And we have a brand new Patreon person, SQ Minion. Thank you. Uber, thank you. If that's even a word. I don't even know what
it is now.
It is. Let me show you some other cool things I've got. So I picked this up, I think not last Martin Station, but the Martin Station before that. This is a Dutch teapot, probably 17th century, made of pewter, probably like 90% lead. Anyway, this guy is really got a great, interesting construction. It's like engraved. You could definitely tell it was pieced together out of different chunky pieces. It's emulating the shape of Chinese porcelain, some of the higher end ones, but of course they're reproducing it in, the inexpensive material of the day. Couldn't do that very well in tin, but you can do it in pewter. So this guy picked that up, thought it was just so cool. Here is a tin tea caddy. So tea was sold in little. You would have little tea caddies or little containers. This one's oval and all soldered up. Now, if you look really closely at it, it was probably painted black. In the time period, the paint's kind of come off of it. It's even got some tea in it, probably from the 18th century. This guy's, and if you look at the bottom of it, you can even see the color. So they would kind of, they would put coatings on it to keep it from rusting. I can't remember what the terminology is that. This is probably from the 19th century, but the 18th century ones were very, very similar. What other goodies do I have here? I picked up a, this is probably reproduction, pewter teapot from the time period. And somewhere there was the giant one. Oh yeah, you'll see this one in the video on Sunday. Giant. This one, they might have done coffee in this or tea. Generally, later on, coffee, the spout comes up because the tea grounds fall to the bottom, or the coffee grounds fall to the bottom. Tea is generally from kind of the middle part of the pot here. Teapot. It's a lot of tea there. What else do I have? Got all kinds of crazy goodies in the teapot. This was actually from home, ceramic tea caddy, which you'll find similar pieces in the time period. So let's jump back in and look at these pictures, unless you have something else you want to talk about real quick.
I do have a super chat here. Hold on just a second.
Super chat.
So this is from Stinky Water. The iFunny community loves you. I think it's a Reddit community. I just looked it up. I think that's what it is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Here we go. This is from like the 1860s, but you can see tea chests here. So these are bigger sort of chests. They could have changed size in the time period, although you see, I think some are smaller and some are larger. And it's like, look, there's nothing but tea coming out of that ship. 1740s, and we have people sitting around drinking tea. It's a social thing. This looks like some of that dry surfaced redware, which was getting popular in the 18th century. The inside is glazed, the outside is unglazed, but it's kind of a porcelain that has had a real nice kind of a matte feel to it. There's some beautiful pieces from that time period that are like this. Although if you want to, we don't have a picture, but the agate ware,
yeah,
wow. Just so beautiful.
There is I put it in the description section. We did a live stream on teapots.
Right. So
and
there we
there's
go.
agateware in there.
Okay.
So it's in the description.
Here's a teapot, tea service here with multiple pieces engraved, probably silver and, just crazy expensive from the time period. We see here, I love the person who's pouring here. She looks so interested, excited about her job. It's like, if all these people died tomorrow, I'd be happy. Anyway, there she is, looking a little, I don't know what.
She didn't have a good cup of tea that morning.
She's probably just pouring it all over the entire table. I have no idea what's going on. But there's the tea service there. Little porcelain pieces, some redware pieces or red porcelain. There's probably a tea caddy there at her feet here, and she's sort of pouring out tea there out of the caddy. I don't know. It's a little fuzzy.
I know, this one didn't have a ton of pixels.
Right, so. We didn't have as much to work with as we could have. Some beautiful porcelain pieces, European porcelain pieces. Although, even though we could probably say this was European just because of the design, later on, they are asking for special designs even from China. So I can't always judge that. If we flipped it over and looked at the underside, it might be helpful. Here is a modern picture of Twinings, and Twinings is really important to tea in the 18th century. So early on, the original Twining sort of got involved in tea when he was young and kind of specialized in tea. And he was a person who really kind of started the first tea houses specifically. And he was doing, even then in the early 18th century, he was blending teas and talking about blending teas. So you might blend teas because different chests of the same stuff needed to be sort of homogenized, or you might blend teas that had some distinct flavors, but you wanted to, kind of take the edge off or bring new flavors in. So you might mix a green and a black tea together. I don't know about, like, say, flavorings, like chocolate mint, right? Okay, they're probably not doing that in the 18th century. Maybe. But they are doing some other tea blending, and Twinings is one of the persons at the first kind of start of that. And he's the kind of person who pioneered the idea of a tea house. So women might not be let into the coffee house, so let's have a special place for them to just drink tea. This is better anyway, right? So Twining's important for that. This is from the factory where the person who invented porcelain there, what's his name? I forget it. Botner, whatever.
I love this teapot.
Isn't it great? It was
I
like
love it.
somebody
So
went
incredible.
nuts.
But how on earth would you wash it? Think of all the little dust
Oh,
getting into
it would be
all
terrible.
Maybe you'd boil it? I don't know.
I think they had to use a pressure washer on it. Anyway, crazy. It is some wild stuff in the time period. A family enjoying tea. I think it's funny because we can see people handling a teacup in just about every way possible. They're like presented this thing and they're like, what do I do with
Well,
this?
and a lot of the ones we see do not have handles. So.
No, most of them it seems like not.
And also,
they're like-
most of the people are holding still to have their portrait painted. So
I don't know why they're being goofy with their holding their cup. Anyway, it just doesn't look right. Tea caddy, 1702. This is an early piece, and likely very expensive, just like the tea. Folks out on the lawn enjoying their afternoon tea. Let's hope they're drinking tea. Sporting and playing with the dogs and having their afternoon tea. You might have a special traveling tea set. It's that important to your life.
yes,
Right?
They're
It's
like, we can't
I don't go anywhere
No. without my tea,
my
my
outfit.
special traveling set.
Here's a trade card from the time period, and it's their little sign is at the sign of the tea chest, right? And they do sell trays and tea boards and tea chests for exportation. So fun stuff there. Here's a tea caddy or a tea, tea storage container of the time period. Notice the lock and key. Your tea is that expensive. Tea is so expensive and it's highly taxed that your servants might keep the tea leaves after they've made the tea and dry them out and resell them to other people. You might even resell them to other people who would dye them a little bit and shrink them back up and sell it in as new tea, not once used, twice used tea. Or you might be stealing tea from your employer because it's so expensive. So you're going to lock that stuff up. Here we go. 1760s, something like that. We've got the classic tea cup and she's got a little mini tea service. Little mini teapot, a little bit of sugar.
Just for her.
Yeah, just one person. teaspoon time period. An entire tea set there. Notice the little brazier and the copper vessel for heating the water and then pouring it into the teapot. This is from that same factory, famous for porcelain, and it has a sugar cone under her little table as well as some other tea items there at her feet. Another super fancy place to store your tea. Obviously, it's like the king's tea chest or something. I don't know. Somebody's awful rich to have an item like that.
Yeah.
Afternoon tea. This is probably European, maybe, Dutch or something. With the tea vessel or the hot water vessel on the ground, heating the water, and then all the tea items there up on the table. A little tea caddy from the time period. It's missing its little top. It was probably a metal top, and that's gone by the wayside, rusted, whatever. But the ceramics basically live forever. Look closely here. You can see the underbody of the clay. It's a darker color than it's not a white clay underneath. There we go. We wanted to use this as a thumbnail, but we really didn't have enough pixels on that. It's a nice little picture of somebody not noticed at this time. Not somebody who's really rich drinking tea, even though this is 1720s.
I'm not sure that it isn't one of those somebody
pretending to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This 1812 and everything's kind of changed, and the styles have changed not only for the clothing but the tea wear also. All those things are changing in our time period. Chelsea pensioner sipping his tea out of a saucer, probably because it cools off much faster. And they're back to the tea plantation. So I wanted to mention the timeline on tea really quick here, and specifically what's going on in about, I think it's 1784. So right after the American Revolution, the second generation or third, I think it's second generation Twinings, talks to the government of Great Britain saying, you know what? You make a lot of money from taxing tea. But if you lowered the tax on tea, because the tax is so much of the cost of tea, that you will probably drive a lot more demand for tea. I will make more money, but by accident. And you will make more money from taxation if it becomes more popular. And
Right. He's like, quantity, right, will help you out.
Quantity is the thing. And so they do that. They change the tax on tea in Great Britain in 1784, and it becomes so inexpensive that anyone can drink tea. Now, there's a lot of medical controversy about tea in the 17th century and the 18th century, where some people think tea is the greatest thing ever. It will cure all things, and you should drink up to, I think, 200 cups a day. Somebody said something like that.
But maybe they were cups like that.
Yeah. Well, even then, 200 cups of this a day, I mean, it'd be either you're drinking or you're going to the bathroom. One of the two.
All day.
Back and forth, right? There are people who think tea is the panacea, and then there are others who think it's terrible. And in fact, if you drink tea, you will die. Yes, there were people saying that. Or that it's a drink that the poor are spending money on, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't be wasting their money on tea. It's not good for them, and they're just doing it because, right? So there's just... Look, I'm at the end of my time, and I haven't even scratched the surface on tea. Wow. Again, if you're interested in tea, you can find it on our website. We have bohea, we have oolong, we've got gunpowder tea, and we just did it. I mean, basically, I came back after lunch, and I said, we've got to sell chocolate mint tea. And everybody was like, no, John, we don't have time to do that. And I said, we do too.
Yeah, Dad comes up to me and he's like, quick, Ivy, make a new product and then print the labels for it and then package it and then find a spot for it on the shelf in like an hour. And I was like, okay, sure.
Because she loved me.
Because I love you.
It all worked out great.
I first started drinking tea because we went on we were in Africa for like 3 weeks in the bush, and there was nothing else to drink. And you couldn't drink the water without boiling it. And so, there was no place to get a Coca-Cola or anything like that. And so that is where I started drinking tea. And I still probably drink the equivalent of 10 cups a day. So And that's why I have such a svelte figure.
It's all due to the tea.
Is there anything else we need to talk about?
Okay, let me go back. Okay, super chat from Speed and Style Tony. Some funds to keep the kettle warm.
Thank you so much.
And a question from Eric F. Was drinking chocolate a popular tea alternative? And I put in the chocolate video, but I thought I might wait.
Yeah, so the big three, and you'll see them talked about many times, just 1, 2, 3, chocolate, tea, and coffee. They are the hot drinks of the time period, and they all come in about the same amount, same period of time. In the latter part, the second half of the 17th century, 1660 is really kind of, chocolate is actually a little bit, not chocolate, coffee's a little bit before tea. Chocolate's coming in about exactly the same time. And they are all kind of fighting it out with different cultural groups, popularity-wise, but they're all very popular. Now, tea kind of pushes, at least in Great Britain, kind of pushes coffee to the side in the early part of the 18th century, probably because Twinings wanted to make more money. Regardless, tea kind of pushes coffee out, but chocolate is always down there. It's always with them. And the chocolate in the time period wasn't hot chocolate. We know today that's like 90% milk and sugar. It was a lot kind of more of the bitter drink and a lot more just kind of a simple chocolatey drink, right? And there's a whole chocolate episode. We probably talked about chocolate in a live stream. Who knows what? Anyway, it's really interesting how those three kind of go along together. So I'll stop talking about chocolate.
Okay, I think we're all cut up.
Wowzers. I got all this tea I got to drink. Look at all this stuff. I want to thank everyone for coming into the Nutmeg Tavern today. It's always enjoyable to talk about the things I get to research and get excited by. This particular topic. Today in the world, tea is the number 2 drink in the world behind water. Isn't that crazy? It is maybe not that popular in America, right? But still.
See, I would have guessed coffee, but I
Right.
think that's just because we're in America. Yeah.
Right. So it is so important to the 18th century. Like tobacco is important. And of course, at least it's more popular than tobacco today. But the things that, the commerce that it drives, the culture that it brings together, and it is a kind of a thing you saw. Very few people were drinking tea by themselves. Some people were. But it's a thing where people get together and do it. It's a community thing. So I think it's a wonderful product, and I certainly enjoy it. And I love what it's doing in the 18th century. It's driving culture. And I think mostly in a good way. I think. I don't know that anybody got killed over a cup of tea, probably, but regardless, a great topic that just keeps going on and on. So thank you guys so much for being in the Nutmeg Tavern today and chatting with me, listening to me blab on and on about tea. I really want to thank everyone who, reaches out and supports us directly. You're buying in Nutmeg Tavern mugs, or you're buying wonderful Nutmeg Traders tea, or you're supporting us at Patreon or Townsend's Plus or membership. Some people do all of them. It's just like, how many ways can I help John? Well, thank you. Thank you for helping me what I do. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Ivy. Mm-hmm. I hope you have just the most tremendous weekend. We're going to have great weather. So thank you so much for coming in to the Nutmeg Tavern today. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thanks for watching.